The HFY fleet emerged from hyperspace like a swarm of predators. 300 warships bristling with weapons that had burned worlds and shattered civilizations across 10,000 years of conquest. Overlord Tethran stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion, watching the tactical display with satisfaction as his forces took up attack positions around Varanthos Prime. The Galactic Council had been evacuated, its representatives fleeing to their own territories. The moment the HFY fleet was detected, only the human delegation remained, their small diplomatic vessel holding position near the station as if they had nowhere to run. This is what happens when weak species forget their place, Tethran announced to his crew. The humans thought clever tricks and technology could substitute for true strength. Now they will learn the price of defiance. He opened a communication channel to the human ship. Ambassador Yoon, he said, your demonstration was entertaining, but it changes nothing. Surrender your species to HFY protection immediately, or I will reduce your vessel to atoms and continue on to do the same to your homeworld. You have 1 minute to decide. Ambassador Seojin's face appeared on the view screen, and Tethran was annoyed to see that she did not look frightened. Overlord Tethran, she replied calmly, you have studied humanity for 30 years. You have cataloged our weaknesses and mocked our limitations and concluded that we are prey waiting to be claimed. But you made a critical error in your analysis. You assumed that because we appeared weak, we were not also studying you. Tethran laughed. Study us all you like, he sneered. What could you possibly learn that would save you now? Your fleet is 5 ships. Mine is 300. No amount of knowledge can overcome that disparity. Seojin smiled, and something in that smile made Tethran's confidence waver for the first time. I would ask you to check your fleet status, she suggested, but I suspect you are about to discover the problem without my help. Alarms began screaming across the Eternal Dominion. Overlord, shouted the tactical officer. We are receiving reports from across the fleet. Weapon systems are offline. Navigation is malfunctioning. Engineering reports unauthorized access to core systems. I do not understand how this is possible. Tethran spun to face the displays, watching in horror as ship after ship reported. Cascading failures, engines shut down without warning, life support systems began cycling to emergency protocols, weapons locked into safe mode and refused all commands to arm. What have you done? He roared at Seojin's image. The ambassador's expression did not change. For 30 years, humanity has been placing assets throughout galactic civilization, she explained. Software, packages hidden in routine updates, hardware, modifications installed during standard maintenance, intelligence, agents recruited from species who grew tired of HFY brutality. Your entire military infrastructure has been compromised since before you decided to threaten Earth. She leaned forward, her eyes hard. We could destroy your fleet right now, Overlord. Every ship, every warrior, every piece of equipment that the HFY Dominion has ever built. We have had that capability for nearly a decade, and we chose not to use it. Do you understand what that means? Tethran did not respond, his mind struggling to process the complete reversal of everything he had believed about humanity around Varanthos Prime. The human fleet arrived. It was not large by galactic standards. Perhaps 50 vessels compared to the 300 HFY warships. But it moved with precision and coordination that spoke of extensive training and absolute confidence, and instead of attacking the disabled HFY fleet, the human ships began taking up protective positions around them. Your vessels are experiencing cascade failures, announced Commander Moon Tae-young over the fleet-wide communication channel. If left unchecked, these failures will result in critical system collapses within 6 hours. Reactor breaches, life support failures, hull integrity compromises. Millions of your warriors will die. Humanity is not going to let that happen. Human engineering teams began docking with HFY vessels, not to board them as enemies, but to repair the damage that humanity itself had caused. They worked alongside confused HFY engineers, sharing expertise and providing assistance, treating the warriors who had come to conquer them as colleagues rather than foes on the bridge of the Eternal Dominion. Commander Moon materialized via transport beam, accompanied by a small security team that kept their weapons holster at a Thrawn reached for his sidearm. But Moon raised a hand. "Please do not," the human said quietly. "I'm not here to fight you. I am here to offer you something better." He handed the Overlord a datapad displaying information that made Tethran's blood run cold. Every HFY military facility was listed, along with detailed specifications of its defenses and vulnerabilities. Every supply route, every communication node, every secret installation that the Dominion had spent millennia building. Humanity knew it all, and humanity had chosen to show mercy instead of destruction. "We do not want your subjugation," Moon said, echoing words that humanity had repeated countless times in their preparations for this moment. "We do not want your territory or your resources or your service. What we want is your alliance." Tethran stared at the human. This small, soft creature, who had just demonstrated power beyond anything the Dominion could have imagined, and felt something he had never experienced before in his entire life: humility. "Why?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "You could destroy us. You could take everything we have built and leave us with nothing. Why would you choose friendship when you could have conquest?" Moon smiled, and there was warmth in it that Tethran had never seen from any species. "Because that is what humans do," he said simply. "We turn enemies into friends. It takes time and patience, and sometimes it requires demonstrating that we are strong enough to be worth respecting. But in the end, we would rather have allies than subjects. The galaxy has enough empires. What it needs is a family." 3 days later, the Galactic Sovereignty Council reconvened to deliver its verdict on humanity's status. The vote was unanimous. Humanity was granted full sovereignty and offered a permanent seat on the council. The first new species to receive such an honor in over 100,000 years. The Siluran Elder, who had watched 10,000 civilizations rise and fall, addressed Ambassador Seljin privately after the ceremony. "We have seen species gain power through strength," the ancient being said, its voice carrying the weight of eons. "We have seen them gain power through cunning and through technology and through sheer brutal will. But we have never seen a species gain power the way humanity has. You reached out your hand to those who would have destroyed you. You showed mercy to those who deserve none. That is not weakness, Ambassador. That is a strength the galaxy has never seen before." Seojin bowed respectfully. "We are not perfect," she admitted. "Our history is full of violence and cruelty and mistakes that cost millions of lives. But we learned from those mistakes, and we are trying to build something better. Not just for humanity, but for everyone." The elder nodded slowly. "Most species grow powerful and burn out," it said. "They consume everything around them, until nothing remains. Your kind grows powerful and reaches out to lift others up. That is why you will outlast us all." 6 months later, Ambassador Yoon Se-jin returned to Earth for the first time since the demonstration began. She stood on a balcony overlooking the city of her birth, watching celebrations that had been ongoing since the Council's verdict was announced. Humanity had proven itself to the galaxy, not through conquest or destruction, but through patience and preparation and the simple, stubborn refusal to become the monsters that others expected them to be in command centers around the world. Human leaders were already planning the next phase, not military expansion, not territorial conquest, but outreach one by one. Humanity would contact the species that the HFY and others had conquered one by one. They would offer assistance and friendship, and the chance to build something new one by one. They would turn the galaxy's victims into partners in a civilization that valued cooperation over domination. It would take centuries, perhaps millennia, but humanity had time. That was the real secret. The truth that the galaxy had never understood humans were not weak because they needed sleep and food and each other. Humans were strong because those needs had taught them patience, endurance, and the knowledge that nothing worthwhile was ever accomplished alone. The universe had mistaken human kindness for weakness. They would not make that mistake again, and somewhere in the vast darkness between stars, humanity reached out its hand toward the future, ready to show the galaxy what true strength really meant. The Combat Resolution Arena was the largest simulation space in known galactic civilization, capable of generating entire worlds for species to demonstrate their approach to warfare. Commander Moon Tae-young stood at the command center of the human contingent, studying the scenario parameters that had been selected for the final trial. The simulation was straightforward in its cruelty. A civilian population of 1 million simulated beings occupied a small territory, and an overwhelming enemy force was approaching with orders to destroy everything. Each species would take turns defending the scenario, and their performance would be measured by civilian survival rates, resource efficiency, and overall strategic effectiveness. The HFY had already completed their attempt, and the results were exactly what everyone expected. Overlord Tethran's forces had met the enemy head-on in a devastating display of military power, throwing wave after wave of warriors against the attackers until the invasion was broken through sheer attrition. They had won, technically, but the cost had been staggering. 60% of the defending forces had been killed or incapacitated. 30% of the civilian population had perished in the crossfire, and the infrastructure of the defended territory had been reduced to rubble. An acceptable outcome, Tethran had declared proudly, demonstrating the warrior spirit of the HFY. Now it was humanity's turn. Commander Moon, the Arbiter, announced, "Your forces may enter the simulation when ready. The enemy will begin their assault in 30 standard minutes. You have until the assault is concluded to demonstrate humanity's approach to conflict." Resolution. Moon nodded and led his team into the simulation. They materialized in the command center of the defended territory, a small city surrounded by open terrain that offered little natural protection from the approaching enemy. The enemy force was massive, outnumbering the defenders by a factor of 10. With armored vehicles and air support and every advantage that military technology could provide by any conventional analysis, the situation was hopeless. The only question was how many civilians would die before the inevitable defeat. Moon studied the tactical display for exactly 90 seconds, then began issuing orders. Evacuation teams, begin moving civilian population to underground shelters immediately. Engineering corps, start collapsing the main approach routes and establishing debris fields. Intelligence units, I want detailed analysis of enemy communication frequencies and command structures within 10 minutes. All combat units, hold positions and do not engage until I give the order. His officers moved to comply without question. They had trained for this scenario, and 100 others like it, in the years since the Global Coordination Initiative had begun preparing humanity for galactic competition. The watching aliens were confused. They are not deploying defensive lines, observed the Mandari representative. They are not positioning forces to meet the assault. What kind of strategy is this? Cowardice, Tethran sneered. They know they cannot match us in combat, so they hide their civilians underground and hope the enemy will lose interest. Pathetic. But the Siluran elder watched with ancient eyes and said nothing. The enemy assault began exactly on schedule. Thousands of hostile units advancing across the open terrain toward the city and they found nothing to fight. Every route into the defended territory had been blocked or sabotaged. Buildings that should have provided cover for advancing troops collapsed at precisely the wrong moments. Communication signals were jammed and spoofed, causing enemy units to receive contradictory orders that sent them wandering in circles. Supply convoys were intercepted by small teams that appeared from nowhere, disabled vehicles, and captured provisions, then vanished before response forces could arrive. The enemy commanders grew frustrated. They had expected a battle, a straightforward contest of strength and firepower. But instead they were fighting shadows and echoes and the consequences of their own confusion. "Where are the defenders?" demanded the simulated enemy general. "Why will they not stand and fight?" The answer came in pieces. Over the following hours, a fuel depot exploded, disabling a third of the enemy's armored vehicles. A command post was infiltrated and its communications equipment sabotaged, cutting off coordination between assault groups. Water supplies were contaminated, forcing the enemy to divert resources to finding new sources. None of these actions involved direct combat. The human defenders never formed battle lines or charged enemy positions or engaged in the kind of glorious warfare that the Kethvari considered honorable. Instead, they simply made it impossible for the enemy to function by the midpoint of the simulation. The attacking force was in complete disarray. Units had lost contact with their commanders and were operating independently, often working at cross purposes. Morale had collapsed as soldiers realized they were fighting an enemy that could strike anywhere at any time, but could never be found or engaged. And through it all, the civilian population remained safe in their underground shelters, completely untouched by the chaos above. Commander Moon finally gave the order to engage directly, but not in the way anyone expected. Small teams of human soldiers approached isolated enemy units under flags of truce, offering surrender terms that were remarkably generous. "You have been abandoned by your commanders," the human negotiators explained to confused enemy soldiers. "Your supply lines are cut, your vehicles are disabled, and reinforcement is impossible. You can die fighting an enemy you cannot see, or you can lay down your weapons and be treated with dignity and respect. The choice is yours." One by one, enemy units began to surrender, not because they had been defeated in battle, but because continuing to fight had become pointless. The human approach had not destroyed the enemy army. It had simply made the war impossible to win. When the simulation ended, the statistics were displayed for all to see. Civilian casualties 0%, defender casualties 3%. Almost all minor injuries. Enemy casualties 12%, mostly from accidents and friendly fire caused by the chaos of their own confused response. Enemy forces surrendered or incapacitated. 81% infrastructure damage. Minimal. The observation gallery was silent. "This is not warfare," Tethran finally sputtered. "This is not combat. You did not fight. You simply hid and sabotaged and talked. Where's the honor in this? Where is the glory?" Commander Moon addressed the gathered representatives, his voice calm and measured. "The objective of the trial was conflict resolution," he said. "Not conflict escalation, not demonstration of martial prowess, not the accumulation of glory. The goal was to protect civilians and end the conflict with minimal loss of life on all sides. Humanity has achieved that objective." He turned to face Tethran directly. "You asked where the honor is in our approach. I will tell you. The honor is in the million civilians who are alive because we did not turn their homes into a battlefield. The honor is in the soldiers, both ours and the enemy's, who will go home to their families instead of dying for strategic objectives. The honor is in choosing to be clever rather than brutal, patient rather than aggressive, merciful rather than victorious." He paused, and when he spoke again, his voice carried the weight of all human history. "Humanity has studied war longer than most species in this chamber have existed," he said. We have fought ourselves across every continent and ocean of our world, in conflicts that killed hundreds of millions of our own kind. And we have learned, through terrible experience, that true victory is not destroying your enemy. True victory is making the fight unnecessary. On Earth, the final phase of humanity's demonstration began across the planet. Hidden facilities, activated systems that had been built in secret over 3 decades, orbital platforms emerged from concealment. Thousands of defensive stations that had been constructed in the asteroid belt and moved into position over years of careful planning. A fleet of warships, small by galactic standards, but representing technology that no alien had ever seen, powered up their engines and began moving into formation, and broadcast stations across human space began transmitting a simple message on every frequency the galaxy used. This is Earth. We are not prey. We are not pets. We are humanity, and we are ready to take our place among the stars. The universe was watching, and humanity was done pretending to be weak. The adaptation trial was designed to be impossible. That was the entire point. As the ancient species who had created the demonstration understood that true capability meant being able to function in environments completely alien to one's biology. The rules were simple enough. Each species would be placed in an environment that was fundamentally hostile to their natural form, and they would be given 6 hours to not merely survive, but to accomplish a series of complex tasks. Failure meant elimination. Lieutenant Park Chae-won stood at the entrance to the human testing chamber and read the parameters displayed on the screen before her. The environment selected for humanity was an underwater realm. Pressure equivalent to 300 meters below sea level. Temperature just above freezing. Visibility limited to a few meters in any direction. The tasks included constructing a functional shelter, solving a series of engineering puzzles, and retrieving an object from a location nearly a kilometer from the starting point for the Mandari, the aquatic species who had laughed at humanity during the council session. This would have been a vacation for humans. It should have been a death sentence. Are you certain about this? Asked the Arbiter, who had come to observe the human attempt personally. The conditions specified are beyond what your biology can tolerate. Your species has no gills, no pressure-resistant physiology, no natural adaptation to underwater existence. We can modify the parameters if you wish to proceed with a reasonable chance of survival. Chae-won smiled and shook her head. That will not be necessary, she said. Humanity accepts the challenge as specified. The doors opened, and Chae-won led her team of 6 specialists into the pressure chamber that would transition them to the underwater environment. Each team member carried a single small pack, and they wore bodysuits that looked completely inadequate for the task ahead. The Mandari representative was observing from a viewing platform, and its laughter bubbled through the water-filled chamber where it floated. This is entertainment, at least. It gurgled to its companions. Watch the air breathers drown. Perhaps they will provide a few minutes of amusement before they die. What happened next would become legendary throughout galactic civilization as the pressure chamber flooded and the humans sank into the underwater environment. They did not panic, and they did not drown. Instead, they calmly opened their small packs and began assembling equipment that made the watching aliens fall silent in confusion. The bodysuits were not inadequate at all, but were instead compressed packages of advanced technology that expanded and sealed around each human, creating personal underwater habitats that maintained pressure and provided oxygen recycled from the water itself. The packs contained tools and materials specifically designed for underwater construction. each one the result of decades of research into exactly this kind of challenge within 30 minutes. The human team had established a base camp and begun work on the required shelter within 2 hours. They had completed construction and moved on to the engineering puzzles within 4 hours, with 2 hours still remaining. Lieutenant Park Chae-won retrieved the target object and returned to the starting point. The trial was complete in the observation gallery. The Mandari representative had stopped laughing. How is this possible? It demanded, its translator struggling to convey the shock in its voice. Humans cannot breathe water. They cannot withstand pressure. This violates everything we know about their biology, Ambassador. Yoon Seo-jin stepped forward to address the gathered representatives. You are correct, she said calmly. Humans cannot breathe water, and we cannot withstand deep pressure, and we cannot survive underwater without assistance. But you misunderstand what adaptation means for our species, she gestured toward the display showing her team working efficiently in an environment that should have killed them. Most species adapt their bodies to their environment over millions of years of evolution, she explained. Humans do not have that luxury. Our world is too hostile and too variable for biological adaptation to keep pace. So instead, we adapt our environment to our bodies. We build tools and shelters and vehicles and suits that allow us to go anywhere and do anything. Give us a problem, any problem, and we will engineer a solution. That is what human adaptation looks like. The Siluaran elder, the oldest being present, leaned forward with sudden interest. Its species had watched civilizations rise and fall for longer than most stars had burned, and it recognized something in the human approach that the younger species had missed. You prepared for this specific challenge, it observed, its ancient voice carrying weight that silenced all other conversation. You knew what environment would be selected, and you developed technology to overcome it. Seo-jin nodded respectfully toward the elder. We prepared for every possible challenge, she admitted, for 30 years since first contact. Humanity has been studying the galaxy. We have analyzed every species, every technology, every trial and test that might be used to judge us, and for every challenge, we have developed a solution. The equipment my team used today was designed 15 years ago, tested extensively, and held in reserve for exactly this moment. The implications of her words rippled through the assembly like shockwaves. Humanity had not merely survived the adaptation trial, they had demonstrated that they could anticipate challenges decades in advance and prepare solutions before those challenges ever manifested. This was not the behavior of a weak species desperately struggling to survive. This was the behavior of a strategic power playing a very long game on Earth. In command centers spanning every continent, the men and women who had dedicated their lives to this moment allowed themselves a small measure of satisfaction. The Global Coordination Initiative had been established 2 weeks after first contact, when humanity realized that the galaxy operated on principles of strength and dominance that made Earth's bloodiest wars look like children's games. Every major nation had agreed to unprecedented cooperation, sharing resources and intelligence and expertise in pursuit of a single goal, proving to the universe that humanity was not prey. 30 years of work had gone into developing technology for every environment the trials might present. 30 years of training had prepared specialists for every possible challenge. 30 years of patience had allowed humanity to appear weak and harmless while building the capabilities that would ensure their survival, and now the galaxy was beginning to see what that patience had produced back at the trial grounds. Overlord Tethran pushed through the crowd to confront Ambassador Seo-jin directly. His fury was barely contained. his clawed hands twitching with the urge for violence that his species channeled into every interaction, tricks, and technology. He snarled, "That is all your species has demonstrated." The endurance trial showed one exceptional individual, not species capability. The adaptation trial showed clever engineering, not true strength, but the final trial is conflict resolution. And there is no trick that will save you there. He leaned close, his breath hot against Seojin's face. "The Kethvari have fought and won 1,000 wars," he hissed. "We have crushed species far more formidable than yours beneath our claws. When my warriors face your champions in combat, the universe will see humanity for what it truly is, weak and soft and ready for subjugation." Seojin did not flinch or step back or show any sign of the fear that any rational being should have felt, facing a Kethvari overlord instead. She smiled. "We were hoping you would feel that way," she said softly. "Please, Overlord, demand that the final trial begin immediately. We are eager to show the galaxy what conflict resolution means to humanity." Tethran's eyes narrowed with suspicion, but his pride would not allow him to back down. "So be it," he growled. "Let the final trial commence, and when it ends, remember that you asked for this." He turned and strode away, already composing orders for his finest warriors to prepare for combat ambassador. Seijin watched him go and felt the weight of 8 billion lives resting on what would happen next. But she was not afraid. Humanity had been preparing for this moment since before she was born, and the Kethvari had no idea what was coming. The trial grounds had been constructed in orbit around a dead star, a massive arena station capable of simulating any environment in the known. Galaxy Captain Big G1 stood at the entrance to the endurance chamber, wearing nothing but a standard temperature-regulated bodysuit, and watched as 12 other species champions prepared for the first trial. The Kethvari champion was a monster named Varax, bred specifically for combat and conditioned from birth to withstand punishment that would kill lesser beings. He stood nearly 4 meters tall, his armored plates gleaming under the artificial lights, and he looked at Jiwan the way a predator looks at something too small to bother eating. The human actually showed up. Varax rumbled to his companions. "I expected them to forfeit the moment they saw the trial parameters." Laiwan said nothing and simply stretched his muscles in preparation for what was coming. He had trained for this specific challenge for 8 years, ever since Earth's intelligence services had obtained detailed specifications of the demonstration trials through methods that the Galactic Council would have found deeply concerning. The Arbiter's voice echoed through the chamber. "The endurance trial will now commence," the crystal being announced. "Champions will enter the simulation environment and remain active until they can no longer continue. The environment will cycle through 12 different conditions, each lasting 1 standard hour. Any champion who falls unconscious, requests extraction, or suffers critical biological failure will be eliminated. The last champion standing will be declared the victor." The massive doors slid open, revealing a vast artificial landscape that currently resembled a frozen tundra. June felt the cold hit him immediately. A bitter wind that cut through his bodysuit like it was made of paper. He began walking forward, and around him, the other champions did the same. The Varath representative moved easily through the cold, its crystalline body immune to temperature variations. The Mandari struggled immediately, its aquatic biology poorly suited for frozen environments. The Kethvari champion Varax seemed comfortable enough, his armored plates providing natural insulation, and Jiwan simply kept walking, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air, his muscles burning as his body fought to maintain core temperature. 1 hour passed, and the environment shifted. The frozen tundra transformed into a scorching desert, temperatures soaring from far below freezing to well above what most species considered survivable. G1 watched as the Vorath representative immediately began showing signs of stress. Its crystal structure expanding dangerously in the sudden heat. The Mendari champion collapsed within minutes, its gills unable to function in the dry air, and was extracted by medical drones before permanent damage occurred. But G1 simply adjusted. He had trained in saunas and ice baths, in high-altitude chambers and pressurized environments. In every condition that human ingenuity could simulate, his body was a machine designed by millions of years of evolution to handle exactly this kind of abuse. He sweated and panted and felt like he was dying. But he kept moving. The Kethvari champion Varax was struggling now. Though he tried to hide it, his species had evolved on a world with stable temperatures, and their armored bodies were designed for combat, not thermal regulation. Heat built up inside him with no way to escape, and his movements became sluggish and uncoordinated by the fourth hour. When the environment shifted to a toxic atmosphere that required all champions to rely on their natural biological filters, half of the original 12 had been eliminated by the 8th hour. When crushing gravity made every step feel like walking through wet concrete, only 4 remained: John and Varax and 2 others, an insectoid Churix and a gaseous Velith, continued forward through conditions that should have killed them all in a secure viewing chamber high above the arena. Ambassador Yoon Seojin watched the trial alongside representatives from every major galactic power overlord. Tethran stood nearby, his expression growing darker with each passing hour. Your champion is more resilient than expected, he admitted, grudgingly. But the endurance trial is not about individual toughness. It is about species capability. One exceptional human proves nothing. Seojin smiled but did not respond. She was watching the biometric data streaming from G1's monitoring implants. Data that told a very different story than what the aliens were seeing. G1 was not exceptional by human standards. He was well-trained and highly motivated. Yes, but his physical capabilities were well within normal human parameters. What the Kethvari and the others did not understand was that normal human parameters were absolutely insane by galactic standards. Humans could function in temperature ranges that would kill most species in minutes. They could survive on minimal water for days and minimal food for weeks. They could maintain physical activity for hours without rest, and when they did rest, they recovered with remarkable speed. The galaxy had looked at humanity's soft bodies and short lifespans and constant need for sustenance and concluded that they were weak. They had not considered that perhaps those requirements existed because human biology was operating at a level of intensity that no other species could match. The 12th hour arrived, and the environment shifted one final time. The simulation became a perfect recreation of a standard habitable world. Mild temperatures and breathable atmosphere and comfortable gravity, and one by one, the remaining champions began to fall. The Churix collapsed first, its compound eyes going dark as its system finally surrendered to accumulated stress. The Velith dissipated next, its gaseous form losing cohesion as it exhausted its energy reserves. And then there were 2 G1 and Varax faced each other across the artificial meadow, both barely standing, both refusing to give in. The Kethvari champion was a wreck. His armored plates cracked from thermal stress, his movements jerky and uncontrolled as his overheated body struggled to function. But he was still standing, still fighting, still refusing to accept defeat. G1 was not in much better shape. Every muscle screamed in protest, and his vision blurred at the edges, and he could feel his heartbeat pounding in his ears like a war drum. But he had one advantage that Varax did not, had been trained to suffer, not just to endure suffering, but to embrace it, to use it as fuel, to transform pain into determination. Humans had spent their entire evolutionary history being hunted by things faster and stronger and deadlier than themselves. And they had survived not by being tougher, but by being more stubborn. Vorax took one step forward and his legs gave out beneath him. Mighty HFY warrior crashed to the ground, his body finally surrendering to the heat that had been building inside him for hours. And medical drones swarmed to prevent permanent damage. One stood alone in the center of the arena, swaying but upright, and raised one trembling fist toward the observation chamber. The viewing gallery erupted in shocked murmurs. A human had won the endurance trial. A member of the weakest species in the competition had outlasted champions from civilizations that had ruled the stars for millions of years. In the observation chamber, Overlord Tethran turned to Ambassador Seojin with barely controlled fury. "This proves nothing," he snarled. "Your champion got lucky. The adaptation trial will expose the truth. No species can master all environments. Humanity will fail. And when you do, the Dominion will be waiting." Seojin bowed politely, her expression revealing nothing. "Of course, Overlord," she said. "We shall see what the next trial brings." But deep beneath the mountains of Earth, in facilities that officially did not exist, massive machines hummed to life as humanity prepared the next phase of their demonstration. 30 years of preparation, 30 years of patience, and the galaxy was only beginning to understand what that meant. The Great Hall of the Galactic Sovereignty Council stretched for nearly a kilometer in every direction, and Ambassador Yoon Seo-jin had never felt smaller in her entire life. She stood at the center of the speaking platform, surrounded by representatives from over 200 species, each one watching her with expressions ranging from pity to contempt to something that looked uncomfortably like hunger. Varanthos Prime Station had been built 3 million years ago by a species long since extinct, and it served as neutral ground for the most powerful civilizations in the known galaxy. Today it would decide the fate of Earth. "The assessment will now begin," announced the Arbiter, a towering figure made entirely of living crystal, who served as the council's voice. Of La Seo-jan straightened her formal jacket and prepared herself for what was coming. She had trained for this moment for 15 years. Ever since humanity first made contact with galactic civilization and learned the terrible truth about how the universe really worked. The strong ruled and the weak served. There was no middle ground. I call upon the HFY Dominion to present their petition," the Arbiter continued, and Seojin watched as Overlord Tethran rose from his seat among the gallery. The HFY were terrifying creatures by any standard, standing 3 meters tall, with 4 arms ending in razor-sharp claws, their bodies covered in thick armored plates that could stop most projectile weapons. They had conquered 63 species in their 10,000-year history, and they had set their sights on humanity the moment first contact was made. "Honored Council," Tethran began, his voice resonating through translation devices that made his words understandable to every being present. "I stand before you today to request that the species known as humanity be classified as a protected species under galactic law." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Protected species status sounded kind, even generous, but Seojin knew exactly what it meant. A protected species lost all rights to self-governance and became wards of whatever empire chose to claim them. They became property. The evidence supporting this classification is overwhelming. Tethran continued, activating a holographic display that filled the center of the chamber with images of Earth and its inhabitants. "Observe the human form and tell me this is a species capable of galactic participation." The display showed human beings in various contexts, and Seojin had to admit that from an alien perspective, the images were not flattering. Humans lacked natural weapons of any kind, possessing neither claws nor fangs nor venomous glands nor armored skin. Their bodies were soft and easily damaged, requiring constant protection from environmental hazards. Humans require sleep for approximately 1/3 of their existence. Tethran explained with obvious disdain, rendering them unconscious and vulnerable for 8 hours of every planetary rotation. They must consume food and water multiple times per day or face rapid physical deterioration. Their reproductive cycle is absurdly slow, producing only 1 or 2 offspring at a time after a gestation period of 9 months. And perhaps most damning of all, their homeworld is classified as a Category 7 death world, a planet so hostile that 70% of its surface is covered in a substance toxic to most galactic life. Subject to extreme temperature variations, violent weather patterns, and predators that would qualify as apex threats on any civilized world. The holographic display shifted to show Earth from orbit, and then zoomed in to show hurricanes and volcanoes, and sharks and bears, and all the other dangers that humans simply live with every single day. The fact that humans survive on this world at all is remarkable, Theron admitted. But survival is not the same as capability. These creatures have achieved spaceflight through sheer stubbornness, not through any inherent gift for science or war. They pose no threat to any established power, and leaving them to govern themselves would be an act of cruelty. Under Kethvari protection, humanity would be cared for and guided toward productive service to the greater galactic community. He turned to face Seojin directly, and she could see the predatory gleam in his eyes. I believe Ambassador Yoon would agree that her species needs our help. Whether they realize it or not, Seojin felt the weight of 200 species watching her, waiting to see how the representative of these weak and fragile humans would respond to such a thorough dismantling of everything her kind claimed to be. She took a deep breath and smiled. The Kethvari Overlord presents a compelling case, she said, and she could see the surprise on Tethran's face at her apparent agreement. Humanity is indeed soft and slow and hungry and tired and all the other things he has described. We cannot outrun a Mendari through water or outfight a Kethvari in single combat or outlast a Vorath in vacuum, by every metric this council typically uses to measure a species' worth. We fall short. She paused and let the silence build before continuing. But I would remind the council that metrics can be deceiving. 30 years ago, when humanity first encountered galactic civilization, we were told that we were nothing special. We were told that our achievements meant nothing compared to species who had mastered faster than light travel millions of years before our ancestors climbed down from trees. We were told to accept our place at the bottom of the hierarchy and be grateful for whatever scraps the greater powers chose to throw our way. And we smiled and nodded and said yes. Of course, you are absolutely right. Seojin walked to the edge of the speaking platform and looked up at the assembled representatives. What you see when you look at humanity is weakness. She continued, what you do not see is what that weakness has forced us to become. Every challenge you describe as evidence of our inadequacy is actually evidence of something else entirely. We sleep because our brains require rest to process and integrate information in ways that allow for creativity and problem-solving beyond pure logic. We eat constantly because our metabolisms burn hot enough to fuel endurance that would exhaust any species in this chamber. We reproduce slowly because we invest everything in each child, teaching them and training them and preparing them for a universe that wants them dead. And we survived our death world not by being stronger than our predators, but by being smarter and more patient and more willing to cooperate than any threat we faced. She turned back to face Tethran. The Kethvari have conquered 63 species through superior strength, she said. Humanity has never conquered anyone. But I wonder, Overlord, how many of those 63 species are still around to tell their side of the story? The silence in the chamber was absolute. I invoke the right of demonstration, Seojin announced, her voice ringing clear across the vast space. As is permitted under the ancient laws of this council, I demand the opportunity for humanity to prove our worth before any judgment is rendered. The Arbiter turned to consult with the senior council members, and after a moment of deliberation, the crystal being nodded, the right of demonstration is granted. The Arbiter declared, humanity will face the three trials: endurance, adaptation, and conflict resolution. Should they fail any trial, protected. Species status will be imposed immediately. Tethran laughed, a harsh barking sound that echoed through the chamber. I welcome this development, he said with obvious pleasure. No weak species has ever survived the demonstration. Your bravery is admirable, Ambassador, but it will not save your kind. Seo Jin bowed politely to the Overlord. We shall see, she said later that evening. Alone in her quarters, aboard the human diplomatic vessel, Seo Jin composed a message using encryption protocols that no species in the galaxy knew existed. The message was simple, just 6 words, but it represented 30 years of planning and preparation and sacrifice by every nation on Earth. They have taken the bait. She wrote, begin Phase 1. Somewhere in the depths of space, hidden from every sensor and telescope the galaxy possessed, humanity began to move.